and our nation. Small, uncrewed aerial systems have become a defining feature of modern combat. Adversaries at every level exploit drones for reconnaissance, targeting, espionage. They are inexpensive, adaptable, and lethal, which threatens our freedom of maneuver, our survivability in combat, and it also puts the homeland at increasing risk. Countering drones is both a warfighting and a homeland defense imperative. Our formations must be able to detect, track, identify, and defeat these systems anywhere on the planet. They also must have the legal authorities and policies in place to allow them to use the state-of-the-art equipment we give them. In response to this growing threat, on 27 August of this year, the Secretary of War established the Joint Interagency Task Force 401, aimed to unify the federal counter-drone enterprise. This task force brings together all the services of the Joint Force, the interagency of our federal government, our defense industry partners, and aims to increase our shared intelligence, improve our authorities, and accelerate the fielding of effective counter-drone capabilities. Today's discussion will bring that mission to life. We're grateful for the comments the Secretary of the Army mentioned yesterday as the executive agent for JITF401 and his vision to expand and increase counter-UAS capabilities to the warfighter. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Adam Schur, the Communications and Outreach Officer for JITF401, and will serve as the moderator for today's discussion. We are grateful to be joined by the Director of JITF401, General Ross, the Lead Counter-UAS Unit Chief for the FBI, Mr. Mike Torfey, and two industry leaders, Lieutenant General Retired Thurgood and Colonel Retired Bob Kelly, whose companies are seeking to make that state-of-the-art CUS technology our warfighters need to defend the homeland and remain lethal on the battlefield. They bring a unique set of combat, homeland security, law enforcement, and business acumen to this conversation. Over the next hour, we'll explore how JITF401 plans to close operational gaps, synchronize authorities, and accelerate innovation across government and the private sector. We'll spend the last 30 minutes on your questions. I'd like to begin, General Ross, with you. Why did the Sec War create JITF401, and how will this creation change the Army and the entire federal government's approach for counter-UAS operations?
Well, Adam, thanks for the question. Thanks for the intro. First, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Chief Dixon Carter and AUSA for giving us an opportunity to have this discussion. As I look around the room here this morning, I knew that counter-UAS was important, but if you look at the leaders that have assembled here today to think about the problem and ensure we have a shared vision going forward, it's impressive. So I appreciate everybody who came to be a part of this. So my name is Matt Ross, and I'm the director of JITF401. I've been working counter-UAS for about the past 10 years, and I've seen it from a bunch of different angles, from the receiving end and from the sending end. Most of my experience is joint. So while we're sitting at AUSA and I'm wearing an Army uniform, I think it's important to ensure that we are clear that the Joint Interagency Task Force 401 is a joint entity. And if you look around the room, you'll see a couple folks from the JITF team that are here as we start building out our joint manning. So thank you guys for being here as well. So why did the Secretary create JITF401, and what are we being asked to do? And we've been established for about 6 weeks. We've got a lot accomplished so far, and we've got a lot of work to do. I tell you, one of our goals is to change the way that the department thinks about counter-small UAS. That's a big ask. The way that it was established, when JITF401 was established by the Secretary of War, the Secretary of the Army remains the executive agent for counter-small UAS. Our acquisition executive remains inside of the Army, and I know there's going to be questions about that, but I'll save some of that as we get into the question and answer for some of our industry partners to really understand what that construct looks like. For the whole group, I think it's probably worthwhile just to compare JITF401 to its predecessor as the JCO. How is JITF401 different and distinct from JCO? First, we are going to be fully joint And so we'll have a JMD or JTD here within the next couple of months that will ensure that we are manned from across the services. Two will be interagency. It's not enough that we get our house in order internal to the Department of War. We cannot do this alone, especially if we're talking about defense of the homeland. Counter-UAS does not begin and end a defense line. And so we've got to work with our interagency partners, and we're excited to have Mike here this morning, and we're excited to build out that team. Third, the JITF will have procurement authority. So in areas where we need to move fast, I talk about changing the way that the department thinks about counter-small UAS. We can't think about that on a 5-year time horizon. We can't think about counter-UAS on a 10-year time horizon. We've got to be able to iterate more quickly. And in areas where we are learning lessons, or our partners and allies are learning lessons, we've got to be able to incorporate that into our force at speed. Third, as we think about the other services, one of the things we're going to be charged with is ensuring interoperability and consistency with our counter-small UAS approach across the department. So the JITF will have approval authority for, will be the arbiter for future programs of record in other services, in every service. So that includes the Army, that includes the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines. The reason we're going to do that is because we want to make sure that we're not working in stovepipes. And we want to make sure that if we talk about a modular open system architecture, that holds true. And that something that's developed under one program of record can plug and play with things that are developed in another program of record. We have 3 lines of effort inside of JITF401. The first is to defend the homeland. The second is warfighter lethality. And the third is joint force training. We could feel really good about delivering exquisite capability into our formations, but if we don't have the people to use it and they're not proficient with those systems, then it just won't achieve the effect that we had hoped. When I think about counter-UAS capabilities, I'm going to give you I'm going to hit a couple topics here because they're questions that have come up over the past 6 weeks. And I know I won't be able to answer every question here with these opening remarks, but I want to at least touch on them, and then we can expand on them during the question and answer. I don't think that there's a one-size-fits-all for counter-small UAS. If there was a silver bullet, we would already have it. Our partners would already have it. It's a problem. It's a challenge, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. So when I think about counter-small UAS capabilities, I think of them, each has its own purpose under certain conditions. So I almost think of them like golf clubs. You can't be frustrated that a high-loft club doesn't go 250 yards. You build them for different purposes. So in some cases, we have to be able to sense at great distances. We have to be able to track and identify at great distances to be able to effect before an unmanned system arrives at its intended target. In some cases, we can accept a much smaller margin. And so we don't have to sense quite as exquisitely. And so that matters. And I look around at some of the division commanders in the room. That matters to you because if you look at protecting your installation, and you may not need the most exquisite radar or EO/IR camera or RF effector. You may determine that my most likely threat that I'm going to see is a Group 1 or Group 2 UAS, and I need a low collateral interceptor. And that's all I need. But I want to give you that flexibility, opposed to the department or the services saying, hey, here's what you get. This is what a counter-UAS kit looks like. One for you, one for you, one for you. We've got to do better than that. Immediate focus. Our immediate focus, where can we make the biggest change in the short term? I tell you, I had a conversation with Major General Nauman when he was down at JTF Southern Border. One of the first things we need to address is authorities. And so we're taking that on wholeheartedly across the department to make sure that our installation commanders and commanders that are deployed abroad have the authorities they need to use the systems to defeat threats. Number 2, Replicator 2, or the provision of counter-small UAS capability to our critical infrastructure and our protected sites. That is something that JITF401 has taken over from DIU. If you hadn't heard that yet. As we do that, we want to make sure that we deliver solutions that help you solve the problem and they don't create additional problems. And so we just ran an exercise, Operation Clear Horizon, where we looked at every service's counter-UAS capability and we tested them against the most advanced threats of today. So we tested them against RF controlled drones, against drones that frequency hop between different bands. We tested them against drones controlled over LTE. VAC-10 Special Forces Group flew a drone from Fort Carson, Colorado against our targets down at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida over LTE. We used GPS-controlled drones. We used fiber optically controlled drones. So what does that mean? It helped us identify those areas where we have gaps in our swing. We identified those areas where we need additional capability, where you're going to need additional capability. We're also looking at a gap analysis across all of the services. As I stepped into this job, I asked myself, hey, I wonder how many requirements we have for Counter-UAS capability across the entire department. And I asked a lot of people, and I didn't get a clean answer from anybody, but as we've canvassed all of the services, I can tell you we have about 23 actual authoritative requirements documents for Counter-UAS. I thought as we looked at that, we'd see a requirement and a requirement and a requirement and a requirement and identify gaps. Actually, that's not what we found. If you look at the requirements, they're written very broad. There's not gaps in how they're written. There's gaps in the capability that we procure. We still have those gaps, but there's requirement documents that would account for them. And so, on the contrary, I think a lot of times what we end up doing is we try to fill up as much of that space as possible with what we procure. So we build a really complex system that is RF to feed, it's tied into a kinetic to feed, it's got organic sensing as part of this full stack capability, and then it's delivered late to need, it's expensive to maintain, and it's really expensive to sustain over time. And so if I were to jump back to Replicator 2, if we delivered that to a senior mission commander or an installation commander and said, hey, here's your Counter-UAS capability, we're going to give it to you for free. But by the way, it costs $1 million a year to sustain it, and 10 soldiers a day to operate it. That's a challenge. And so that's why we've got to make sure that we can configure that a little bit and be deliberate with that. We are pursuing rapid technology transfer, and you guys have seen this in open source, the rapid technology transfer from the battlefield into our formation. In areas where we know systems have proven effective against contemporary threats, we've got to accelerate the process of putting it into the hands of our service members and into the hands of our warfighters. Joint manning, I talked about. You've got Colonel Beha sitting right up here in the front from the Air Force, Major Abercrombie from the Marines, proud member of our team. We're building that out, and then we're building out our interagency manning. To build out our interagency manning, I think it's going to take us a few months. We're on week 6. We actually don't even have a place to work yet. But once we get that place to work, we're confident that if we build it, they will come, and we're going to build out that interagency manning. What does that matter for you? It means that we've got the FAA integrated into JITF401. So as we do testing and experimentation with new capabilities that we want to be able to use in support of NORTHCOM, they already know the capabilities and limitations of those systems, and we don't have an extended process of trying to get them approved to use them. It means that we have DHS sitting internal to JITF401. So if you were working somewhere in support of NORTHCOM or in some cases Indo-PACOM, and you have a requirement to share data from inside a fence line to outside a defense line, we want to help with that, whether it's the data standards or the approval to do it. They're both solvable problems, and so that's where the JITF is going to help. And then the last thing I will say is, as we look to synchronize the testing, assessment, and evaluation of Counter-UAS capability across the department, one of the things that I think we will provide is the clearinghouse of data. So for any of our industry partners here, if you've got a Counter-UAS capability and you've come out to one of our events, it probably took a while for you to get feedback from that event. You should get the feedback from that event quickly, and we should have that data internal to JITF401, and we should share it with our partners in the FBI. We should share it with our partners in Customs and Border Patrol. We should share it with our partners in the U.S. Secret Service. We should share it in some cases with our partners and allies that are looking to procure similar capability. Instead, right now, we actually test in stovepipes. And so we want to do that as an authoritative document or as an authoritative list of systems that have been tested against the most contemporary threats, so you can see how they performed in that environment. And then we give you a marketplace or some way to be able to procure that capability as appropriate for your echelon, whether that's a battalion, a division, a corps, or another service. And then my last comment here would be, For JITF401, we only have one measure of effectiveness, only one. We're going to consolidate a bunch of resources. We will support programs of record. The only measure of effectiveness that I use is rapidly putting Counter-UAS capability into the hands of the warfighter at home and abroad. And if we do that, we're a success, and if we don't, we're a failure. So that is our only measure of effectiveness. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Torfey, I'd like to turn to you. You've heard General Ross describe this tremendously large writ mandate mission for JITF401. Does federal law enforcement see the same challenge and threat picture? How does this War Department task force help you in your mission where preventing criminal activity is part of their homeland defense?
Thank you for the question, and I should clarify, you may be wondering what exactly does the FBI do in the domain of counter-UAS, and if you haven't been tracking, we do derive our authority through 6 U.S.C. 124N, which was passed in 2018, implemented in 2019, starting with our protection of the Super Bowl in 2019. That authority is currently elapsed with the government shutdown, so we're looking forward to those authorities being re-upped and extended and potentially expanded. We are extremely excited about the formation of JITF401. We've been doing counter-UAS here in defending the homeland for 6.5 years. During that time, we protected over 82 special events, SEER-rated events, and national special security events. And we've detected well over 1,000